Do you think the Democratic and Republican Party are different sides of the same coin?
I think that as a person who, I'm now 28 years into my voting life, right? I turned 18 in 1996, a presidential election year. I registered to vote in my AP English class at New World School of the Arts High School as an NPA. I was a proud registered independent or unaffiliated voter, and remained that way till like 2018, and now I'm back to that. In fact, and I voted for Ross Perot for president that year in 1996, and ever since then I've been a super voter, which is to say I have voted in, I can't say 100%, but I can tell you I'm well into the 90th percentile. Every single, not only national election or presidential election, but every local election, even single issue referendums where you go into a voting place to just an empty voting place usually because turnout's so low to vote on one single issue. Because I think, you know,
It's important.
democracy, it's a muscle, right? If you don't exercise it, it atrophies. And the fact that we're able to participate like that means I'm there for it. Like I'm going to be there and I'm going to vote on it. Not always going to be on the winning side, but I'm going to participate in my democracy. When I see a depressed voter turnout, nothing makes me sadder. And I don't care who turns out, just turn out. Just
Why do you think that is?
You just said it yourself. People are disengaged. It's very hard to be involved. It's very hard to be informed. It's very hard to access accurate information. And honestly, it hurts to give a shit. I lose sleep at night over things that I care about, over things that I perceive as injustices, over people who, and a lot of people feel powerless. They feel that their vote doesn't count, and they feel that when they try to speak truth to power that they're going to get crushed. I mean, I've seen people in government, and I think this is an important thing too. First of all, everything's politics. Everything's politics, and whether that means politics, or it's political in some way, or requires some diplomacy. Everything is politics. So I think it's important to be as informed or as involved as you reasonably can. But it's also very hard. Every morning, I wake up to what I'll call like an inbox of injustice. There'll be DMs, there'll be emails, there'll be text messages, some from total strangers who are like, this is a terrible thing that's happening to me in the city of Miami, or this is a terrible thing that's happening to me in the city of Miami Beach, or wherever they are. And it's overwhelming because there are so many people who need help. There are so many people who are struggling with so many things. There are so many people who feel victimized by their own government. And it's extremely frustrating, and it's extremely onerous to have to deal with that. So most people just unplug and back out. But I want to answer your question.
Yes.
Because what I am 28 years later into voting so disappointed about is, okay, none of us would walk into an ice cream shop or a gelato shop if there were any less than 10 flavors to choose from. Of course, we're only going to get one or two maybe, but like we like variety. There's so many different people who have different tastes and different flavor. How do we still have a political duopoly? How is it that there's only two major political parties and a pendulum just continues to swing? And as that pendulum swings, the vast majority of Americans who are not on either end of the pendulum, but are all somewhere in between that pendulum, all get left behind and all get neglected, and all are disaffected in some way that creates this malaise and creates this, as you said, like this lack of interest and involvement in politics. And I think I call it like the WWE-ification of politics. I'm guilty of it as well. I think we all are, people who are politically involved are, but it turns out to be unproductive when it comes to solving problems of real Americans, because look at how many people are dissatisfied, with the state of the country or the direction of the country. So I think that particularly when you talk about local politics, which I think is the most important politics, because what you probably come to realize is that the decisions made by local government and local politicians affect us every second of every minute of every hour of every day. So stuff that goes on in DC might eventually trickle down. That usually takes a little bit longer. But what our local governments do, and there's 35 of them in Miami-Dade County. There's 34 municipal governments and there's a county government. So, and most people don't know, like, I'm sorry, what city do I live in or what town who do I complain to? So you go to your municipal government and they point to the county. You go to the county and they point to the state. You go to the state and they point to the feds. You go to the feds and they point back to the local government. So there's this diffusion of responsibility and people get confused about well, who's responsible for the lights going green and red? Who's responsible for picking up my trash? Who's responsible for fixing potholes and painting lanes and lines on the ground? And people just get, and it's by design, they get deliberately confused. And local elections, I try to make this point that they're nonpartisan. You go to vote for a local mayor or commissioner, then there's no R or D by their name. Okay, occasionally.
But does that make that nonpartisan?
Yeah, it's what's called a nonpartisan election. But now, you ask a good question because then parties often get involved in these so-called nonpartisan elections. And again, I think that's unproductive. We just had a state constitutional amendment on the ballot to determine whether or not we wanted school board elections to be partisan or nonpartisan. It did not. They remain nonpartisan, which I think is a healthier democracy. I think it's the duopoly, the idea that there's only two political parties in power. And what I find more often than not is people don't change the system changes them. Yes, so when they get into office and they get a taste of that power and they understand the rules, they understand either I'm going to play the game or the game's going to play me, they start to change. And that's why I always say to people, listen, you can support a candidate, you can endorse a candidate, you can donate to a candidate, you can even work for or with a candidate, but don't ever believe in a politician because they will invariably break your heart. They will do something that you don't agree with. They will compromise what you believe to be their integrity or principles or ideology in some way that will infuriate you, and then you'll be brokenhearted.
So there was something that I heard that I believe it was Patrick Bet-David. Are you familiar with?
Yeah, I know him.
He said something where he presented a solution or two scenarios. He was like, one politician, one candidate at a local, at a federal, at a national, at a whatever level that you want to call it. You have one politician that says, I will fix everything for you. I am the solution. Hey, look, I care about you. I have no pleasure in my gain for this. I'm not looking this to make money. I just want to do it out of the love. And you have another candidate that candidate is maybe 90% quote unquote selfless, perceiving that he's acting in the best interest of the voters and the citizens. Or you have a candidate that is that 70-30, 70% selfless and 30% selfish, meaning, is it wrong for a candidate to have his or her own agenda if it still progresses the city or the nation or the country in a proper direction? Because a lot of people will say, well, Trump, he has that where you see it and you can't argue against it. He has that where he wants to be seen as, hey, look, I did this. But in turn, he's still making some proper decisions to get the country in a better track record. So do you think it's a bad thing for a candidate to have his or her own agenda?
I think first and foremost, no man or woman is the solution.
100%.
Or is a solution.
Yes.
I think immediately in a constitutional republic, in a democratic, in a representative democracy, I think that's not anybody who's putting themselves forward as the solution or the only way, only I can fix it. I think that is just that leads to deification or autocracy or dictatorship. That's not what America is. America has different people with different ideas who come to a table and debate and deliberate how to solve common problems.
Yes.
And how to reach solutions that might not satisfy everybody, but maybe can help the most people that we possibly can. That's what I think the issue with power is. I watch people in power and I think to myself, if you're blessed to have people vote for you and elect you to a position where you can change the lives of people for better or worse, wouldn't you think, man, I want to take this opportunity to help improve the lives of as many people as possible? Like, what an incredible opportunity to say, like, listen, again, not everybody's going to agree with my decisions. I'm not going to be able to help 100% of the people, but shouldn't I be here to help as many people as possible?
Yes.
And I don't think a lot of people act that way, because I don't think you have the 70-30. I think it's the 70-30 in the opposite
Okay.
direction. And so, no, the short answer to your question is no, I don't think it's unhealthy for people to have their own interests or their own agenda. Everybody does. You have to accept that. But I had, I call the Clinton era in this country when we reached an acceptable level of corruption. That's what it wasn't. No corruption, but it's what we call an acceptable level of corruption. Why? Because people were prosperous. The country was in, we were in a time of peace. We were in a good place economically. So we were willing to let some shit slide. You know what I mean? We were like, you know what? You could skim a little over here. You could do a little bit, but as long as as many Americans as possible are enjoying the American dream and the best that this country has to offer, we're good with a little. The problem comes when what we've seen over the last several decades, where the income gap has gotten further and further faster, where more Americans feel left out of the process, feel the American dream is extinct, unattainable, if not extinct. That kind of disaffection, which, I mean, we could talk about the roots of that politically and economically, but that kind of disaffection, while politicians are still basically focusing on their own personal agenda, that's not acceptable. That's not an acceptable level of corruption. While people are suffering and the politicians continue to steal and exploit their public office for private profit, that balance is off. If it's out of whack, The 70-30 balance is reversed.
That's ideal. That's ideal. Yes.
I agree. That's what I call an acceptable level of corruption. And what I'm saying is nothing's perfect. You never get to 100%. I'm not unreasonable.
No, 100%.
Well, I mean, not always unreasonable.
Yes. No. Now, I would agree with you on the fact that it would be naive to think that one person can fix all the problems. But then, is it one person that causes all the problems in the first place? Or is it, an ideology that's being pushed? Or is it a movement that's happening? What I'm trying to say is that as a first-time voter, right, going into the voting booth, trying to educate myself as much as I can, not taking a biased approach from, my parents. I need to just genuinely try to learn as much as I can. And what I see is that there is such a vast difference today in the political parties, in the beliefs of both of the candidates on the ballot, at a local level as well. And, it's challenging to navigate through that. But it's also like there's such a vast difference that I don't know, it will be hard to trying to get somewhere with this, because as Miami-Dade County turned red, right, and the country voted red, I mean, do you think that's a net positive for the county or for the country that it voted red in this sense?
Well, I mean, when you say the country voted red, you have an electoral college and you have a popular vote. So once again, the popular vote was not red. More people voted for the Democratic candidate than voted for the Republican candidate. But that's not how national elections work. They work by electoral college. That's how it goes. It's not a sheer meritocracy. It's not sheer numbers. So I think you have to just be clear about what that means. The majority of Americans who voted did not vote red. That's just a statistical fact. So a good thing or bad thing, what I think is a bad thing is, like I said, this duopoly where a pendulum continues to swap back and forth. I have voted for as many Republicans, if not more Republicans, than I have for Democrats in my 28 years of voting. That includes in nonpartisan elections, but where the candidates, while they're not running as a Republican or Democrat, do have a party affiliation. They are registered
Yes.
as one or the other. So, so I have my voting record is, it's like, looking back, is wild, is crazy. Like some of them make no sense to me. They did at the time. I try to do my best. I try to judge candidates. In some races, I don't vote at all, because I either don't feel sufficiently well informed on the candidates, or I don't really care for either of them or trust either of them. But I always look at, I never look at red or blue. I look at character, competence, and commitment to Constitution. And that's what I try to do my best to make a judgment call on when it comes to choosing a candidate. And listen, I'm a small business owner. I have to all the time hire people. We're crewing up for, getting independent contractors to come on. So I'm constantly looking at reels and resumes, and you don't look at a name, you look at the qualifications. So that's what I try to do with a candidate. I say, like, well, black out the name and look at the CV and see who is most qualified to be a senator, to be the president, to be a commissioner, to be the mayor. And that's how I try to do. There was a time in my 20s where access to information was not as great as it is now, at your fingertips, in your pocket. I was not necessarily as engaged or well-informed a voter, but I was a voter. And that's why I sometimes felt like, I'm not going to vote on this because I'm not just going to bubble in because I like the last name or I like the part. I would just leave it blank because I felt that was irresponsible. But talk about irresponsible. Here's what I would do sometimes if I didn't know how to vote, but I was like compelled to vote in a particular election because it would determine my representative at the in the state house or the Senate or whatever it may be. I never admitted this out loud before, but we're having this conversation, so I think it's important. I would vote against the incumbent. That was my rule. I didn't care who they were, what their party was, if they knew my family.
What drew you to that conclusion?
What is it?
What drew you to that conclusion to vote against the incumbent?
If we're so unhappy with the state of the community, the state of the state, the state of the country, how are you going to vote for the same people that are still in office? So, by the way, that is not a responsible rule of thumb, but that's what I used for time when I was like, you know what? If I was walking into the polling place and I see a sign like "re-elect so-and-so," I'd be like, nope. I'd be like, if you are the incumbent, I'm not voting for you. I'm going to vote for your challenger. Because if we're going to change something and we're going to hold people accountable, I'm going to try to put some new blood or some new names. Again, that was not a well-informed or necessarily wise course of action, but it was a philosophy. I had a position. And still now, we have a state in Florida where insurance is out of control. Our response to climate change and sea level rise, look where we are, is woefully inadequate. The inflation, we are the inflation capital of the country. The rent is higher on average here than the most expensive housing market in the country. The gap between the income gap, the wealth gap, is larger and getting wider here faster than any other place in the country. And we've had single party rule, and now a supermajority of a single party in this state since the turn of the century, since before you were born. So what I'm saying is that, by the way, if that single party rule were Democrats, I would be like, this has got to change. I'd go back to my 20s where I'd be like, all the incumbents have got to go. If I'm this dissatisfied with the state of my state and the state of my finances and the state of the insurance industry and the state of, and the rent's too damn high, the only way to make change is to vote better, or at least vote different. So it's not a matter of is something better or is something not better. It's a matter of how do we make the lives of people better? And more importantly, other than elections, how do we hold any of our lawmakers and our leaders accountable?
Yeah, I agree with that.
How
100%.
do we do that?
Would you, now to play the other side, yes, I think like you said, it is of the best interest to always want what's best for the people living in the city and for the city in general, for the progression of the city, the county, the country, the state. Now, as somebody that's looking out and have traveled to New York, have traveled to not California yet, but seeing these online, seeing the articles, seeing the billionaires coming out of it, seeing the headquarters shift coming here into Miami, into Dade County, wouldn't you say that Miami is doing something right if you see these major cities like Chicago, New York, and San Francisco almost, I wouldn't say failing, but failing?
Well, you're talking about some of the great cities of the world.
Yes.
You're talking about some of cities rich in history, rich in art, rich in culture, cities that are historically always had been and most likely always will be magnets for tourism, for opportunity, for people, for young people looking to break into technology or the arts or any number of industries that are, if not headquartered, at least centralized in some way around these cities. There's just no doubt about that. And all of these cities continue to be fantastic cities. And all cities that attract a lot of people will suffer from the kinds of problems that those cities suffer from. And I think when you talk about why do businesses or why do industries or why do captains of industry or why do people move to Florida or move to Miami, why do you think? Because the motives are not out of benevolence. They're not because it's better than. It's usually almost always, in addition to the climate, by the way, which you can't really argue with wanting to, Chicago has horrific weather for like months out of the year. It's like unlivable. It's like, it's really bitter. If you've ever experienced a winter in Chicago, it's special. It's like worse than like Colorado. Like it's
cold like that. I haven't gone.
Well, because it's wind. So like the wind comes off the water,
sucks, yeah.
and it's a wild, especially as like a Miami boy or a Florida boy. Like you go up there and you're like, this is crazy. Like who the hell in their right mind would wanna experience this, But the truth is, people come here because we have no state income tax. People come here because they couldn't necessarily buy the government they wanted to buy in the cities that they were in, and
do you think that's happening here?
Oh, unquestionably, it's happening. And we know that it's happening here. And incidentally, a lot of the tech companies and a lot of the companies that were supposedly moving here and opening offices here during the pandemic, that didn't pan out. We know there was a lot of leases that were like major leases for entire floors or entire buildings that were defaulted on or that people backed out on, that have led to litigation and acrimony. A lot of tech companies that were going to launch that never did, for example. A lot of companies that were going to move a certain number of people here, but then drastically reduce that number because once they got here, they were like, yeah, it's beautiful, but like there's no schools to put my kids in. You live in Brickell, there's very little quality of life. There's no place to walk. There's no place to ride your bike. Dude, the fact that the only way to get to Miami Beach right now is by motor vehicle, whether it's a bus, whether it's a car, a taxi, an Uber. How is there not, we're a modern first world city. How is there not some sort of badass public transit, a monorail, some sort of train that takes us? There's a lot of reasons politically why that isn't so, but how is there not just a quick, cool, easy way of getting from the mainland here to Miami Beach? There's only 3 major arteries that take, that even get you here. Well, there's 4 if you include the Venetian Causeway, but that's not like really a major artery. But I guess my point is that people come here and go, well, where are the parks? Where is the public transportation? Where is the workforce housing? Because even wealthy people, you need employees. You need people to work in your offices, in your restaurants, in your buildings, to be your to work in your homes. Like, and people are discovering that like it's not all it's cracked up to be, and a lot of people wind up saying like, okay, we're gonna have a smaller workforce or a smaller headquarters here, but mostly what I'm seeing is the motivation is that we have mayors, that includes at the county, that this is a bipartisan fuckery that I'm talking about. We have mayors and we have commissioners who put for sale signs out in front of City Hall and Government Center and said, come here, like whatever you want, we'll give you whatever you want. Bring us your schemes, your scams, your legit industry who want to be able to buy and sell our politicians. This is where you want to come. It's funny to say that that Miami is somehow more corrupt than Chicago, but it absolutely is. And how is it that the mayor of New York was arrested before the mayor of Miami was? That's some kind of miracle, and that just goes to show you that the Southern District of New York is a lot more competent than and a lot more attentive to public corruption than the Southern District of Florida is. And that's what it all comes down to, by the way. Accountability. I keep saying that word. Accountability. That's
I think everybody should agree on that part, that there has to be accountability. Whether you believe they are right or wrong it's irrelevant. You should keep the people in public offices accountable 100%.
When you do something wrong, when they do something wrong, and they should be held to a higher standard than you or I are held. It astounds me every day that Martha Stewart went to prison for a crime that members of Congress commit every single day, because the law is that when they do it, it is not illegal. Like, how is that a thing? And that's how I feel about a lot of public corruption in Miami. If you or I did it, we'd be arrested like that. But by virtue of the fact that they're a public official, they should be held. They're the ones who create the laws, who enforce the laws, who interpret the laws. So that to me is, for example, we have a criminal justice system that we sink billions of dollars into every single year as taxpayers. That is because we accept, unfortunately, that crime is a reality of a prosperous society or a non-prosperous society. There are going to be certain people, who act in a certain way out of greed, out of poverty, out of desperation, out of mental illness, out of antisocial behavior because they're just not good people. Yeah. They're going to break the law, and we need to hold them accountable and make our communities safer. And we spend billions of dollars on law enforcement, on public defenders, on prosecutors, on courts, on prisons, on bailiffs, on and on and on. It's an entire multi-billion-dollar annual industry. But when those people do something criminal, to me, that is a greater sin than when a layperson does something criminal. Why? Because we've already accepted that there's going to be a certain amount of crime. That's why we have a criminal justice system. We know somebody's going to go somewhere and hold up a store or whatever. We got to find them. We got to lock them up, and we got to put them through due process in the justice system. But when someone who is responsible for making laws, who is responsible for enforcing or interpreting laws, those are our three branches of government, right? When they break the law, that is so deleterious to the social contract that's a breakdown in society. That's a breakdown in democracy. That's like, oh, wait, they're held to a lower standard than us, or they're not held accountable at all. That lets sends a message of impunity to them and a message to us that, like, oh, maybe we're not a nation of laws, and we get less confident in our system. And as you've already said, people disengage then from that system because they're like, oh, well, look, the laws apply to thee, not to me, and so why get involved in a system that's fundamentally unjust?
But do you think that's how all of the counties and cities commissioners and mayors are? Or?
Oh no, you can't say all. You can't. It's not a monolith. Like I said, there's 35 different governments. There's almost that many different police departments. So no, that is not true. Of everybody. But who has been held accountable? We know that's true of some of them. So what can you point to? We have a case with a city commissioner where he was just exonerated. He got arrested, it turns out, for something that the state attorney who arrested him in Broward now says wasn't even illegal in the first place, which, by the way, in and of itself is a terrible miscarriage of justice. People should not be arrested for shit that is not illegal. That is outrageous. But here's part of the problem. The people who make these laws have found ways to change the laws and pass new laws that exclude themselves from the laws and from accountability. When you move money around, for example, to conceal its origin, you can be busted for money laundering, and rightfully so. When you move money around to conceal its origin between political committees or political action committees, that's legal. Why? Why is that different? Because the people who make the laws have decided that they don't want anybody scrutinizing their money and their bank accounts the way they would the rest of us. And that's what I'm saying. Like it's if you want to talk about the, what's unfair, that's unfair.
So what do you think is the solution to that then? If you say that there is, this happening right now in our city and in our county, what is the solution?
Accountability.
Well, what does that look like?
It's a great, yeah. We're going to fix it right now, Jacob. You and I are going to fix it right now. In under 40 minutes, we're going to... No, but in all seriousness, it's a great question. And not a lot of people are interested in the answer because I guess it's not that sexy or appealing or alluring. If you want to know what's wrong with anything, you got to look at what's constant. Right? Not the stuff that comes and goes, it's constantly changing. Because there are governments where commissioners come and go, mayors come and go, police chiefs come and go. There are places where they don't, where we have the same last names and the sun comes after the Miami Beach in Miami for a while. The two, the namesake cities.
Is that bad though?
Yeah, I think it's terrible.
Why? Because this is having the same last names of the sun and.
Yeah, I think it's terrible.
Why?
Because I don't believe that these are hereditary positions. I don't believe that politics and mayors and commissioners that these are things that these are jobs that nepo babies are entitled to. I think this should be a meritocracy, and the democratic process should include more voices and more new blood and younger people who want to participate. And what happens is, let me tell you what happens is, because of the spirit of the municipalities, of the 34 municipalities, the philosophy behind them was that we were going to create smaller communities, more localized government, and more accountability, because your friends and neighbors are the government, right? You're going to have these smaller towns and communities and cities, and everybody's going to be able to participate in a more accountable way, because it's not like, oh, it's way over there downtown in the county. It's like, no, this is our local government. And instead, the perversion of that has been they created 34 new ways to steal from us. And so these cities, many of them, have become fiefdoms of unions, of public unions, of lobbyists, of political dynasties, some may argue political crime families, multi-generational. And what happens is that when you realize the county alone has a budget of nearly 13 billion with a B dollars, the city of Miami, the largest city in the county with a population of 500,000, has a budget of approaching $1.5 billion. So all of these places have so much money that what happens is that public money is more addictive than crack cocaine. Once you get a taste of it and you learn how to get it, families and people get involved in accessing that money, in setting up systems of undue influence through lobbying, through unregistered lobbying, through union pressure, through all sorts of, and hereditary pressure. You have juniors, literally juniors, I mean, with the name junior, of sitting public officials who make their living as lobbyists or lawyers, who basically their income is predicated on the fact that, hey, you want to make the wheels go round, you got to grease them in one way or another. And that's perfectly legal. But it's not healthy, and it creates, I hear a lot about communism in this town. There is no communist threat to the United States of America. We're not communists. We've never been communists. We have some very popular social programs. They're the most popular programs in the history of the country, but we're not communists, and we will never be communists. The greatest threat to this country is crony capitalism. It perverts the free market. It is the single greatest threat to free and fair elections, to democracy, to creating a playing field in which the American dream can be possible for more people. And crony capitalism, that means kleptocracies. That means oligarchy. That means places where it's only the people in power who benefit economically from the system, and the rest of us are just kind of, we're victims of their greed. And that is more often than not where we are heading in Miami, and the Miami of today is the America of tomorrow. And we can get back to accountability. We still haven't solved the problem yet, but we will. We can. And I was saying,
wait. So I want to ask you something, because this is, I don't know. I just want to hear your thought on this, because the way that I'm interpreting it, that I understand where you're coming from with the same last names, and like that is a way that, you know, who's in power can stay in power through the lines of generation. Yeah. Obviously, because you're limited to 2 terms, 4 years each.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like I said, I'm just in the with the mindset of learning, and I want to see it from your perspective. But in the same way that you would look at maybe a sports team, or, you know, an actor, or, you know, you see
name one sports team that has the same head coach as it had in 1979, or the son or spouse or brother of that coach is currently the coach, the head coach. Name one.
Well, I was thinking more players.
There's no
I don't know too much. I don't know too much about head coach
either. There's only a handful of even hereditary players in any of these
That's
leagues.
what I'm saying.
Absolutely. Now, sports is interesting. I'm glad you brought up sports, because sports is as close as we probably have in this country to a true meritocracy, where if you're actually good at the game, you get an opportunity to play the game. At the collegiate level, if you're really lucky or really good, at the professional level. But that's a meritocracy. If you don't got game, you're not getting paid to play. That's a far greater example of a meritocracy than our political system, where a last name alone can get you ahead. And I think that's the problem too, is that we ascribe merit, I think, in many ways to misguided criteria. Like their I like the dad, they must be good too. Or even worse, wealth. We look at wealthy people and we say, they can do anything. They must be capable. They must be competent. They must have good character. That's not true. Wealth in and of itself is not a sole criteria that we should use to determine merit in a person or a leader. There are other, by the way, it's not disqualifying. Of course not. There's a lot of brilliant, competent, capable, empathetic billionaires, but that should not be the sole. We should not just idolize wealth in a way, because it is a false idol in and of itself, is what I'm saying. You can't just say, they're rich, they can do that. It's like, no. Like, they might be good at the one thing that they became very successful at. Some of that, that's not even true, because it's hereditary wealth, for example. So they might not even be that smart or that virtuous in any other way. So I'm just saying we need more criteria other than a last name or wealth, to say who should be our leaders or who has merit.
Let me ask you, just to get a little bit a side note, why do so many people hate you? Because what I'm hearing right now is, like we spoke about off camera, that what it seems as if you're coming from, the place that you're coming from, is that you just want to see Miami better. You want to see the county better. I know a lot of people that I told that I was having you on, and they're like, bro, why would you? Like, I'm just curious. I'm not. Would it be right for me to have a podcast and only interview people that I agree with or have the same belief system? No, I don't think that's educational in any way to myself or the viewers. But nonetheless, there's a lot of people that dislike you very strongly. Why do you think that is?
I think the first thing is that I don't care. I'm not running for office. I'm not a public official. I'm not in a position of public trust. So I don't care what people think of me. This is not a popularity contest. So I can be a little abrasive. I can position things, on my podcast or online in a way that people may find, even people who agree with me may find disagreeable. I mean, I have trouble booking Democrats to interview on my podcast because they know they're going to because I criticize them publicly, and they know they're going to get tough questions from me, and they don't want to get tough questions from me, and they don't want to be asked about things that nobody else even bothers to ask them about because they know I know, and they don't want to have to deal with it. So I think that's a big part of it, because I think if we sat down with any number of people, we'd find that we probably agree on a lot more than we disagree on. So I think it might be, my style or my delivery. I think some of it is just good old fashioned, partisanship, because I was a Democrat for a while, for 6 years. Of my 28 years of voting, I was a Democrat for about 6 years. So, I mean, I think that's what it is. But I feel that like everybody has, who wants to get involved has a role, you know, like in their community and in society. And I don't feel my role is to be popular. My role is not to run for office. My role is not, you know, my role is to try to inform, sometimes entertain. You know, we do a lot of humor in our presentation of local political education, parody songs and sketches and remixes of commission meetings, you know, and stuff like that. Because I think it makes people more interested in these people who are making crucial decisions about your life and my life every single meeting. And by the way, they don't want you to participate, at the risk of sounding like DJ Khaled. They don't want you to participate in there. Why? Because the meetings are on a weekday at 9 a.m. Nobody in Miami can show up, you know, who may care or want to participate in their government. It is deliberately designed to discourage participation. And so when I have an opportunity to go and speak truth to power, I go not only for myself, but on behalf of the people that I hear from every single day who are like, man, these guys are screwing me over. And I don't feel comfortable saying something because I'm going to get targeted. And I have commissioners who stand up on the dais and say, if you lived in the city, I would send code enforcement to your house. That is illegal. That is unconstitutional. That is a violation of the charter. Nobody does anything about it. They're not held accountable. But people feel threatened by that. And remember, the people should not be afraid of their government. The government should be afraid of the people in a democracy, because we are supposed to be holding these people accountable. And so I feel my role is to amplify the voices of people who feel that they cannot participate in their system, either because they are disenfranchised by virtue of not being able to attend and participate, or they are scared to participate and have their voices heard, because then they'll feel that they have a target on their backs. And so, I mean, that's what I can say about it, I think. All right, thank you. Yeah.
Go back to the solutions part, because I know you said you had some on that. Solutions. Accountability, I agree. I mean, putting aside, you know, anybody that may dislike you, the truth of the matter is that I think it's hating the way it's said and not hating so much the message, because the message of accountability is
what is it? Hate the game, you know, don't hate the player, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't make this up. Like, this is not a system that I devised. This is the system that we all live in, you know, and have to make the best of.
How do you determine, genuinely, because I want to know, I'm interviewing different mayors, I'm interviewing different congressmen and women, different activists, you know, people from both sides of the party, people that are in office, that are out of office. And, you know, how do you figure out, I guess if that's the proper way of getting, but how do you figure out if someone's doing something wrong, or if they are corrupted, or if they're doing something that's not in the best interest of the citizens? I
mean, listen, a lot of the folks that are in government now have been in government for a very long time and have an extensive track record. And again, you know, I might determine a course of action or a policy as being wrong-headed or corrupt or even criminal, and you may disagree, and law enforcement, you know, or a grand jury may very well disagree. But I think if you look at the track records of the people, how they behave, how their income grows from the time before they are elected to the time after they elected, and to where they are in their elected office today. Look at their financial disclosure forms. Look at what their income level is, look at the source of that income, and then look at the actions that they take as public officials. So when I say they exploit their public office for private profit, that's what is happening. You have charters of cities, like the city of Miami, the largest city in the county, where it is allowable, by virtue of classifying their positions as part-time jobs, it is allowable for elected officials and mayors to have outside employment. And they are, this is true, it is their responsibility to report, recuse, and self-police conflicts of interest. Do you trust them to do that? I don't trust any of them to do that, by the way. None of them. some of them might be trustworthy people, and I might think, but I don't trust them to self-police conflicts of interest and to ensure that, oh, my outside employment and this person paying me is not conflicting in any way with my job here at the city. And we have in the case of the mayor of Miami, a mayor who falsely claims that his client list as an attorney is confidential. That's bullshit. There's such a thing as attorney-client privilege. They don't have to comment on certain elements of their relationship with those clients, but a client list is never secret or privileged. So he's proactively lying to the people, and the people don't hold him accountable. Like, oh, okay, I guess it's secret. It's like, no, it's not a secret. And by the way, every time we learn about who one of his clients are, it's a conflict. Lo and behold, it's a conflict. We're like, oh, while he was getting paid by this person, the city was approving this permit, or his client is proactively lobbying or working in the city to accomplish special, treatment or variances or, or code enforcement or ordinance amendments that would benefit the mayor's private clients. Like, it's just not, that's not how a first world functioning democracy should behave. And to that end, the accountability issue brings us back to what has been the constant here in this community for longer than you've been alive. The top cop, the person whose role it is in Miami-Dade County to hold everyone accountable in the private sector, in the public sector, but has been running a friends and family program that has nearly destroyed this community with respect to public corruption. And that is Catherine Fernandez-Rundle, a Democrat, by the way, who has been the state attorney of this town, the top cop, since Janet Reno left for the Clinton administration in the 1990s. That was like 31 years ago. So she has a record. It's all public. It's all available that you can look at and say, has this been an effective prosecutor's office, or has this been an injustice department? And I focus particularly on public corruption because she has abdicated her responsibility to hold public, both elected officials and people in appointed and hired public office, accountable. And what has that done? That's created this sense of mistrust in government. That has created this sense in people that, oh, why do I even bother to participate? It's just the same people. It's just the same last names. It's just the same political, dynastic crime families. And nobody's going to do anything about it. The prosecutor's not going to do anything about it. And so that is incredibly discouraging. So if you want to hold someone accountable, by the way, in office for 31 years, why is that even allowed? Why is that even legal? Like, term limits are a form of accountability as well. Mind you, you've already pointed out they have clever ways of working. You run for another seat, you move to another district, you run your spouse, your sibling, your child, your offspring, whoever it may be. But that is something that we could change as an electorate. But both parties have basically declined to help to support any competitive challenger against her. And I think that has been, again, why have there been fewer public corruption cases? Why has public corruption flourished as a cottage industry in the 34 municipalities in the county of Dade? It's because we don't have a competent, effective, uncorrupt person holding people accountable for corruption.
Well, I think whether people agree with you or not, I definitely say from my perspective, I hold this to be my own beliefs that, like I said, I want to learn, and you have to be humble, and as a student, understanding that, I don't understand anything, kind of like what we were saying off camera about the lighting, or also taking the approach of not being biased and not saying, hey, okay, so no, I don't agree with that. Like, and I generally, am open-minded about what you said, and I think in essence, this is what I believe in. I don't know, we'll end off on this because I know your time aside, but I believe undeniably that the future of Miami, the future of the county, the future of the country is going to be better in the future than it was 4 years ago, 8 years ago.
Well, you're 19. Years. What choice do you have? You have to believe in something. You have to have some hope, and I appreciate that. And I hope you're right. You have to understand that whether I voted for someone or not, or supported for someone or not, I always root for every president. I root for every mayor. I root for every commissioner because I want them to do good. I want them to be good. I want them to enact policies that will improve the lives of people. I give them the saying, I give enough rope to hang yourself with. Like, I didn't, I don't when someone's elected to office, like, okay, let's see, as the former and future president would say, we'll see what happens, right? Let's see what's actually going, like how policies are going to be executed. Trump's got a lot of ideas I agree with, but I think they need to be, those are policies that need to be enacted without chaos, right? In an organized fashion, in a fair fashion, and people need to, deliberative bodies need to get together and debate how best to enact those policies. That's what Congress is for. The checks and balances say, okay, we've got some good ideas. How do we execute on those ideas and fulfill the promise of those ideas rather than what we're used to from politicians, which is broken promises, So I'm always hopeful in that with a new election, with a new administration, with new people in office, there is an opportunity for something better and there's an opportunity for something to improve. But then the proof, as they say, is in the pudding. So, I don't go back to, who was Linda, what's her last name? You mentioned her at the beginning, but is it like the wake up lady?
Yes.
Okay, I know who that is. So, yeah. People send me her texts and things. She thinks that I'm behind the fascist Twitter account or whatever.
I was doing research on Twitter and your name came up a lot with that, so I don't know.
Yeah. So ask me.
Are you?
Am I what?
Are you behind that account?
Which account?
Miami against fascism.
Absolutely not. I am not behind it. I've never had anything to do with it, and I have no idea who is behind it. I think it's kind of, part of me is like, oh, this is like a funny sort of broken brain conspiracy theory that I'm like this sort of like puppet master figure, like controlling all of the town's media or whatever. But I am, it's like I'm Daft Punk because they're wearing masks and who, he must be, but like I'm not behind. Actually, let me say this. I'm on the record on this. I mean, I'm on the record, whatever. You call me and I come and I talk. Like, all of my journalism, all of my activism, all of my art, my documentaries, all my social media is all open and public. Like, you want to know where I stand on something for better or worse, right or wrong, or you want to ask me about my position, like, I'm there. I have no anonymous accounts or troll accounts or secret accounts. Like, any social media account that's associated with me is like obvious, you know what I mean? Like, is like, it has my name like right there, right on it. Like, I don't know why I would have the time for this, but I know where it started because I interviewed them on my podcast like 3 years ago or 2 years ago. So it's like a Phil Hendry, like I was the voice on the, it's just like, it's so, and again, it's like, it's unproductive because it's like, just ask me. By the way, one dude asked me, like on Twitter, he's like, did you write this about? I'm like, dude, no, I don't know who you are. I don't know who's behind this. And in fact, that was a condition of my interviewing them on the podcast, was that while I could verify that they were the people behind it, I wasn't allowed to know who they were. That was part of the condition of the interview. So I was able to verify their control over the account. And the only reason I interviewed them, because I don't have time to corroborate everybody else's online sleuthing, was because the New York Times wrote an article in the summer of 22 where they used them as a source, and effectively America's newspaper of record said, okay, this is accurate. This information and this story checks out. So I was impressed by that because it was an account that popped up. It followed me. I followed it back. Sometimes I read their shit. Sometimes I may have retweeted it. And then the New York Times is like co-signing. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. And like I've always done on my show, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, I'll invite people. Not everybody comes on, obviously. Most people, in fact, do not. But I was like, sometimes I'll invite the journalist on. I'll have journalists on my show, which is why I guess people think I control all the journalists or whatever. I'll invite them onto my podcast. Or sometimes if I want to like get into it and have a cooler episode or whatever, I'll be like, oh, I'll go right to the source. I'll reach out to the source of the story and have them on. So that's what I did. And then I agreed to conditions of an interview, and that's how we got, I asked we do the interview, closer to Miami Beach, and that was my condition, and their condition was, you can verify our relationship to the account, but you can't verify our identities or know our identities, and that's what I agree. And that's the last time I ever spoke to those people or had anything remotely to do with those people. Like, I don't, and on Twitter anymore, I don't even get, I don't even see accounts anymore. Like, it's all, the algorithm's all weird now. So, I don't even see stuff. I'm barely even on, I just, it's unproductive because let's talk about real shit. We just spent an hour or whatever talking about real shit, being intellectually curious, sort of expressing our beliefs and our disagreements, and that's productive. Like anonymous, accounts or whatever, and falsely accusing people of being behind them or doxing people, or I don't have time for that. We're here, we're talking. This is what I make time for in my life. And if you don't like my posts, they're not shy when they don't like, something I say about social media. They know where to find me. Comment and tell me to go fuck myself. I'm totally, that's cool.
Well, I think people can be the judge of that. Like I said, at the end of the day, I hold this belief to be my own. I'm learning as I go, and I emphasize that on this podcast because, I really am learning as I go. I'm young, and I think the most destructive thing to do is hold on to a belief just because this person's doing it, or just because this person's. I think you have to go into it with an open mind into whatever it is that you do.
The reason why I became a journalist and a documentarian is because I share your intellectual curiosity. I'm always curious about things, how they work, why they work the way why they don't work, when they don't work the way they work. And I think that's, I think I came a point in my life where I was a little more closed-minded. And I think then you get older and you realize I was right early on to be open-minded and to be intellectually curious and to hear people out. You're going to agree or disagree, but I think that's healthy and productive. That's
I would say so.
Yeah,
yes.
I don't shut people down. I don't close people off. If you want to talk to me, and like I said, have a constructive conversation about any of these issues that I think affect our lives on a daily basis, I think that is essential and important, and to do it, whether it's face to face or using your name or your face to say this is who I am and this is what I believe and this is what I do, and then we challenge each other on that. And I just think that's dialogue is just crucial, and I appreciate your open-mindedness, and I appreciate your you're inviting me on.
Thank you for taking the time. And
anytime.
I'm going to leave all your descriptions in the links so you guys can go in the description, check out the links. It's Twitter, Instagram, and anything that you want to promote, anything you're working on right now. Which, by the way, obviously, you'll be in the description. For those of you guys that don't know who he is, you'll see the intro and you'll get a better understanding of who he is. But an amazing director, I think, nonetheless, right? People can't argue with the fact that you've created great documentaries. I mean, I watched Cocaine Cowboys. I didn't even know you were behind that until obviously doing research, and a couple months back I was like, oh, no way, I'd love to hear him out. And then I saw the Because of Miami and say, oh, okay, this is even cooler because he's taking it a step further and not just making the documentaries, but also having your own personal brand. But nonetheless, thank you for your time. Like I said, anything you want to promote as far as any documentaries?
We got a new doc coming out from Neon. It's on the festival circuit right now. It premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival. It won Best Documentary at the Key West Film Festival, which is a fun festival if you've ever been. But it's called Men of War, and it is about some former U.S. Green Berets who decided to undertake in the spring of 2020 a coup attempt in Venezuela to overthrow Maduro and install the then interim government president, Juan Guaido. And it did not go well. The press dubbed it the Bay of Piglets. It was a huge disaster. A lot of Venezuelan expatriate soldiers were killed. 2 U.S. Green Berets were arrested and sentenced to over 20 years in prison for terrorism. And it was a cluster. And of course, the entire scheme was initially hatched out of a WeWork in Brickell. So there's always a Miami connection, and it's a wild story. That kind of got memory hold in the pandemic, because that was right at like March 2020, and then the whole world kind of like went nuts, and then it was like nobody remembers that there was that someone tried to coup Venezuela, you know. And it's an amazing story, and what's I think even more powerful about it is, yeah, it's one of these crazy only in Miami stories, like that starts off like a Cocaine Cowboys kind of wacky tale, but then so like it's like this geopolitical action thriller with like some dark humor, and then it kind of evolves into a character study of like this former Green Beret who is a war hero. The guy served a dozen tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan, has multiple awards and accolades and commendations and decorations, and he kind of becomes like the country that he spent his life fighting for and watching his friends die for brand him an enemy, and he like has to deal with that, and it kind of becomes like it evolves into this character study of how like what happens to Captain America's and G.I. Joe's when governments are done playing with them on the battlefield. And it
definitely sounds interesting.
It was an amazing experience working on it, and I hope that Neon will release it sometime in 2025. I hope you'll have a chance to see it.
100%. I'd love to. But like I said, thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Check out all the links in the description. And like always, guys, thank you for making it to the end, and I'll see you on the next one.